Fires still burned across the broken ground where the colony had been. Smoke twisted into the purple sky of New Meridian like dark fingers reaching for clouds that would never come. Scale Singer folded wings tight against a scaled body and moved carefully through the wreckage. Each step crunched on something that had once been important to someone. Buildings lay scattered like broken toys. Ships that had brought families to this world now decorated the landscape in twisted metal shapes. The swarm had come 3 days ago. They always came when colonies were young and weak. The insect creatures moved like one mind in a million bodies, taking everything and leaving nothing but silence. The Galactic Coalition had fought them off, but the cost had been terrible. Scale Singer had fought in the sky, breathing fire down on the endless waves of chittering monsters. Other dragons had fallen. Many soldiers from many worlds had stopped moving. And the colonists, the families who just wanted to farm and build and live, most of them were gone. Scale Singer was supposed to be looking for survivors. That was what dragons did after battles. They could fly over large areas quickly. Their eyes could see heat signatures through smoke and debris. They could reach people trapped in places wheeled vehicles could not go. But 3 days after a swarm attack, survivors were rare. Scale Singer had found 2 people alive in the first day. None yesterday, none this morning. The dragon's thermal vision picked up something unusual near what had been a residential cluster. Most heat signatures after this long were just fires or hot metal. This one was different, smaller, warmer, moving in a way that seemed biological rather than mechanical. Scale Singer approached carefully, using clawed feet to move pieces of a collapsed wall that a human soldier lay there, female, her armor cracked and burned. She was not moving and had not been moving for some time, but she held something against her chest, arms locked around it even in death. A makeshift force field generator flickered weakly around the space she had created with her body. The power cell was nearly drained. Maybe another hour left. Maybe less. Scale Singer used one careful claw to deactivate the field. The sound that emerged made the dragon freeze completely, crying. A human infant, maybe half a year old based on the size. The small creature had bright eyes and made loud noises of distress. The soldier had protected this child with her body and her last power cell, creating a bubble of safety while the world ended around them. The dedication moved something deep in Scale Singer's chest, in the place where old pain lived. Human infants were fragile things. Everyone in the coalition knew this. They could not walk for many months after birth. They could not feed themselves or regulate their own temperature properly. They needed constant care or they died. Most species found this strange. Dragon hatchlings could fly within days. Colonian young could walk within hours. But humans were born helpless and stayed that way for a remarkably long time. The infant looked up at Scale Singer with wide eyes. Most young creatures would scream in terror at the sight of a predator. Dragons were predators. They had teeth designed for tearing and claws designed for catching. Their eyes reflected light in ways that triggered instinctive fear in prey species. But the human infant just stared, tears still wet on small cheeks, and reached out with tiny grasping hands. Scale Singer should call for the medical teams. They would take the infant to the processing center with the other survivors. The child would go into the system, probably end up in a coalition orphanage somewhere. The dragon knew this was the right thing to do, the proper thing to do, the thing that followed all regulations and procedures. But Scale Singer remembered eggs that never hatched. A nest that had been full of promise until the swarm came. The feeling of gathering pieces of shells that should have held new life. The emptiness that followed. Dragons did not cry, but they remembered. They remembered forever. The decision happened in a moment. Scale Singer reached down carefully, so carefully, and picked up the infant in clawed hands that could crush metal. The baby weighed almost nothing. So small, so impossibly fragile. The child should have been terrified, but instead made a soft cooing sound and grabbed at Scale Singer's scaled thumb with both hands. The dragon's body temperature was much higher than human normal, but apparently not hot enough to harm. The infant seemed to enjoy the warmth, snuggling against scales that could turn aside bullets. This made no sense evolutionarily. This made no sense strategically. This made no sense according to any regulation in the Coalition Handbook, but made sense in the way that mattered most. Scale Singer spread wings wide, feeling the familiar pull of flight muscles. The sky was where dragons belonged. The air was where problems became smaller and solutions became clearer. The infant nestled against the dragon's chest, held carefully in place. Those small grasping hands held tight to Scales. The crying had stopped. The child seemed content, even calm, even though they were being held by a creature that most civilized species classified as a dangerous predator. Humans were strange. Their young were helpless but unafraid. Their species was soft but stubborn. They built families out of whatever they could find and called it love. Scale Singer took flight before the medical teams arrived. Powerful wings beat against air, lifting dragon and infant together into the purple sky. The battlefield grew smaller below. The smoke and fire and death faded into the distance. Somewhere behind them, people would ask questions. They would look for the dragon who did not report back. They would wonder what happened. But up here in the clouds, none of that mattered. The infant made small, happy sounds, responding to the warmth and the steady rhythm of Scale Singer's heartbeat. The dragon flew toward the outer system, toward the asteroid fields where ships rarely went, toward a future that made no sense but felt completely right. The child would need a name eventually. Something better than identification numbers and official designations. Something that meant new beginning. Something that meant hope after darkness. For now, though, they just flew. Dragon and human. Predator and prey. Guardian and child. Together in the endless sky. The abandoned mining station looked like a piece of forgotten history floating in the asteroid belt. Its metal walls were scarred from years of micrometeorite impacts. The windows were dark except for one small section where Scale Singer had rigged emergency power. Inside, the dragon had created something that resembled safety, though was far from perfect. 3 weeks had passed since the battlefield. 3 weeks of learning how to keep a human infant alive with no training and no help. Scale Singer had stolen supplies from passing cargo ships, swooping in during their transit through the belt and taking what was needed before anyone could respond. Formula powder in sealed containers. Diapers and packages covered with pictures of smiling human babies. Temperature regulators because the station was too cold. Medical supplies because everything seemed dangerous for such a fragile creature. The infant, whom Scale Singer had started calling Little Warmth in the dragon's own language, was currently sleeping in a makeshift crib built from storage containers and padded with stolen blankets. The child's chest rose and fell with steady breathing. Healthy, safe, alive. These 3 facts mattered more to Scale Singer than anything else in the galaxy. Learning to feed the infant had been terrifying. Dragon claws were not designed for holding bottles. The first attempt had resulted in punctured plastic and spilled formula. Scale Singer had spent hours filing down claw tips and practicing with empty containers before trying again with the real thing. Now the dragon could manage it, though every feeding remained an exercise in extreme caution. Changing diapers had been even worse. The instructional videos Scale Singer had downloaded from the stolen datapad made it look simple. Reality was much messier. The dragon had learned through trial and error, through accidents and near disasters, through moments of panic when the infant cried and Scale Singer had no idea why. But humans were resilient. That was becoming clear. Little Warmth fell asleep to the sound of a dragon's breathing and woke up reaching for scaled hands. The child showed no fear, only curiosity and contentment. This went against everything Scale Singer had learned about prey species and predator avoidance. Baby animals were supposed to recognize danger instinctively. Human babies apparently had different instincts. Scale Singer had researched this during the long hours while the infant slept. Human evolution was strange compared to other species. Humans had been persistent hunters on their original world, chasing prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. They had survived by being stubborn and adaptable rather than strong or fast. And they had domesticated other predators, turning wolves into dogs through nothing but patience and food sharing. Maybe this was why Little Warmth did not fear dragon. Maybe humans were simply built to make families out of whatever they found. The research said humans called it pack bonding. They formed emotional attachments easily and deeply, sometimes to things that were not even alive. They named their ships and talked to their plants and mourned for robots. Scale Singer understood this now. The dragon had lost a clutch of eggs 2 years before Little Warmth appeared. The swarm had come during nesting season. Scale Singer had fought them off, but returned to find the nest destroyed. Dragon eggs were tough, covered in scales even before hatching, but swarm acid had eaten through them. Nothing had survived. The grief had been enormous. Dragons did not have many offspring. Each egg was precious. Each potential hatchling represented years of hope and planning. Scale Singer had stayed in active military duty after that, volunteering for the most dangerous assignments, not really caring about survival. That was how the dragon had ended up on New Meridian when the swarm attacked. That was how Scale Singer had been searching through rubble 3 days after most people gave up hope. Finding Little Warmth had changed everything. The emptiness that had lived in Scale Singer's chest suddenly had something to fill it. Purpose, responsibility, love, though the dragon had trouble admitting that word, even internally. Dragons were supposed to be practical creatures, guided by logic and instinct. They were not supposed to steal infants and hide in abandoned stations. But here they were. The infant stirred and made small sounds. Not crying yet, just waking up. Scale Singer moved to the crib immediately, looking down at the small face. Little Warmth's eyes opened and focused on the dragon. Then the child smiled, a huge expression that showed emerging teeth and pure joy. That smile made everything worth it. Every risk, every stolen supply run, every regulation being broken. Scale Singer carefully picked up the infant, supporting the head the way the videos demonstrated. Little Warmth grabbed at the dragon's snout with both hands, giggling when smooth scales touched soft skin. The dragon's body temperature was carefully regulated now. Too hot, and the infant would get burned. Too cold, and hypothermia became a risk. Scale Singer had learned to maintain the perfect warmth, like a living heating pad. Little Warmth seemed to love this. Always seeking contact, always pressing close at a proximity, alarm chimed softly. Scale Singer tensed. The sensor showed a ship approaching the asteroid belt, moving slowly, scanning. Coalition vessel based on the energy signature. They were searching the area systematically, looking for something, looking for someone, looking for a dragon who disappeared with stolen cargo and no explanation. Scale Singer dimmed the station's already minimal power signature and moved away from the window. Little Warmth sensed the tension and made questioning sounds. Not upset, just aware that something had changed. The infant was remarkably perceptive for such a young creature. Another human trait, perhaps. The research said human babies were born with the ability to read facial expressions and emotional states. They needed this skill to survive since they could not survive alone. The ship passed by after 20 minutes of scanning. Its engines faded into the distance. Scale Singer waited another hour before relaxing. They were safe for now, but this could not last forever. The station was too close to regular shipping lanes. The supply thefts would eventually be tracked. Coalition investigators were not stupid. They would find patterns. They would find this place. Little Warmth needed more than Scale Singer could provide alone. The infant needed proper nutrition, medical care, education, socialization with other humans. One dragon in a broken station was not enough, no matter how much love was involved. But giving up the child meant losing this purpose. It meant being empty again. It meant trusting systems that had failed so many times before. Scale Singer had served the Coalition for years and watched it make mistake after mistake. Watched it prioritize politics over people. Watched it let colonies die because sending help was too expensive Little Warmth deserved better than that. Scale Singer would find another way. Somewhere safe, but hidden. Somewhere with resources, but no questions. Somewhere that could become home. The ice moon called Frostholm looked like a place where hope went to die. Its surface was covered in frozen methane that sparkled under the distant sun. The settlement built into the southern crater was small, unofficial, and home to people who did not want to be found. Scale Singer had heard about it during military service, whispered about by soldiers who knew someone who knew someone. A place for those who left the Coalition but were not criminals. Just tired. Just done. Landing there with a 2-year-old human child took courage. Danny, as Scale Singer had named him from an old human word meaning dawn, rode in a carrier strapped to the dragon's chest. The toddler babbled constantly now, mixing dragon vocalizations with human words in ways that made no linguistic sense, but somehow communicated everything he needed to say. The settlement's landing pad was really just a cleared area of ice with heating elements underneath. A few ships sat nearby, none of them military. Scale Singer touched down carefully, aware of how exposed they were. Several figures emerged from the main building, which was built into the crater wall for insulation. They looked surprised. Visitors were rare here. Visitors carrying children were probably unprecedented that a short, thick-bodied alien with a shell-like back approached first. Colonian species, turtle-like, known for being slow to anger but impossible to intimidate. This one wore old medical insignia on a worn jacket. Behind them came a human woman, middle-aged, with scars on her arms and eyes that had seen too much. "That's a dragon," the human woman said, stating the obvious. "That's a human child," the Colonian responded, equally obvious. "My name is Scale Singer," the dragon said in coalition common language. "This is Danny. We need help." The Colonian's eyes narrowed. "You're the one they're looking for. The rogue dragon who disappeared from New Meridian after the swarm attack. There's been notices about you for 2 years." "I'm not rogue. I'm a parent." The human woman laughed, but it was not a cruel sound. "That's a new one. I'm Bet. Used to run smuggling operations before I decided jail time was not worth the credits. This is Rustback. He used to be a coalition medic before he decided the coalition could stuff its priorities where the sun doesn't shine." Rustback made a grumbling sound that might have been agreement. "Why come here? We're not exactly childcare specialists." Danny chose that moment to lean out from his carrier and wave at both of them, grinning widely. Hi, I'm Danny. Dragon warm. You warm." Beth's expression softened immediately. "Well, isn't that something? He talks pretty good for 2. He learns fast," Scale Singer said. "He has been learning dragon language and human common simultaneously. He can also do basic math and knows 17 constellations by name." "Of course he does," Rustback said dryly, "because human children raised by dragons obviously exceed all developmental expectations. Nothing unusual about that." But the old medic was already approaching, professional instinct overriding skepticism. "Let me look at him. Make sure he's healthy." Scale Singer hesitated, then carefully removed the carrier and handed Danny over. The toddler went willingly, reaching out to touch Rustback's shell with fascinated fingers. "Hard. You hard like Scale Singer's scales, but different shape. He's never seen a Colonian before," Beth observed. "How isolated have you been keeping him?" "Very isolated. Too isolated. That is why we came here." Rustback was examining Danny with practiced efficiency, checking eyes and ears and joints. "He's surprisingly healthy. Good muscle tone. Excellent coordination. Temperature regulation seems fine despite living with a creature that runs about 40 degrees hotter than human standard." "How have you been managing that?" "Carefully. I learned to control my body temperature. Danny learned to tell me when he is too hot or too cold. We adapted to each other." "Pack bonding," Beth said softly. "I've heard about it, but never seen it this clearly. Humans do this thing where we form family units with basically anything that shows us consistent affection. Used to domesticate predators back on old Earth. Turned wolves into dogs over thousands of years just by being friendly and sharing food. This kid has done the same thing with you, hasn't he? You're not a dragon to him. You're just mom." Scale Singer felt something in the chest area that might have been emotion. "I'm not Danny's mother. His mother died protecting him. I'm just trying to keep him alive." "That's what mothers do," Beth said. "Biology is optional. I should know. My birth parents sold me to a mining company when I was 7. The ship captain who bought my contract raised me instead. He was a Trilaxian, had tentacles and 3 eyes, but he was my dad in every way that mattered." Rustback finished his examination and handed Danny back. "He's healthy, but he needs more social interaction. Children require exposure to diverse groups. They need to learn how to be part of a community. One caretaker is not enough, no matter how dedicated." "I know." That is why we came. The Coalition is still looking for you, Beth warned. If they find out you're here, they'll take the kid and probably arrest you for kidnapping. I saved his life. I believe you. But the law is not about belief. It's about paperwork. And you don't have any paperwork saying this child is yours. Danny had snuggled back against Scale Singer's chest, looking sleepy. The dragon wrapped protective arms around him instinctively. So what do I do? Give him to strangers who will put him in a system that does not care about him as an individual? Let him become a number in a database. Or, Rustback said slowly, you stay here. We have about 60 residents. Half are human. A dozen other species make up the rest. We have children here, not many, but some. We're off the grid enough that Coalition patrols don't bother us. We don't cause trouble, so they don't make trouble for us. We could add 2 more to the census, especially if one of them is a dragon with medical supply access. Are you bribing me with sanctuary in exchange for supply runs? I'm suggesting a mutually beneficial arrangement. Rustback corrected. You need a community to help raise this child. We need a dragon who can fly supply runs that wheeled transports cannot manage. Beth here is retired but still has contacts. I'm a medic with no legal obligations to report anyone. We're not perfect, but we're better than what you have now. Scale Singer looked around the settlement. It was small and cold, and probably violated 100 safety regulations. But smoke rose from heating vents. Lights glowed in windows. Someone was cooking something that smelled edible. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere inside the main building. It looked like a place where people took care of each other. We can stay, Scale Singer asked. You can stay, Beth confirmed. Welcome to Frostholm. It's not much, but it's honest. Danny yawned and stuck his thumb in his mouth, already falling asleep. He trusted these strangers because Scale Singer trusted them. That was how pack bonding worked. Trust spread through family groups like warmth through cold space. Maybe this could work. Maybe they had finally found something like home. 6 years changed everything and nothing. Danny was 8 years old now, tall for his age, and lean like someone who grew up in low gravity. He moved through the settlement's corridors with the confidence of someone who knew every corner in crawl space. His skin was darker than when Scale Singer had found him, tan from hours spent on the ice surface under the distant sun. His eyes were sharp and constantly observing. Right now, those eyes were watching the long-range scanner with concern. Scale Singer stood beside him, one clawed hand resting gently on his shoulder. The dragon had taught Danny to read sensor data when he was 6. By 7, he was better at it than most adult operators. That's a Coalition medical frigate, Danny said, pointing at the display. They're broadcasting distress. Plague outbreak. Multiple species affected. They're requesting assistance from any nearby stations. We are not a nearby station, Scale Singer said. We are hidden. They're dying. Look at the casualty reports. 43 dead already. Another 100 sick. The plague hits reptilian species hardest. That means dragons, Scale Singer. Your people. The dragon's chest tightened. We cannot help without exposing ourselves. Maybe we can. Danny pulled up additional data streams, his fingers moving quickly across the console. He had human dexterity combined with spatial awareness learned from living with a dragon. Beth's old smuggling contacts included pharmaceutical suppliers. If this plague has a cure, someone in the underground market knows about it. Beth appeared in the doorway as if summoned. She usually knew when someone was talking about her. Former smugglers developed that sense. I heard. Nasty business. The plague is called Red Death because of how it makes reptilian blood vessels burst. Very fatal. Very painful. Is there a cure? Scale Singer asked. There is. But the Coalition Medical Authority and the pharmaceutical guilds are in a pricing dispute. The guilds want triple the normal rate. The authority is refusing to pay. So the cure exists, but is not being distributed. Danny's face went hard. He looked older when he was angry. People are dying because of money. People always die because of money, kid. That's how the galaxy works. That's stupid. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Won't argue with you there. Beth leaned against the wall. But what are you going to do about it? You're 8 years old and officially don't exist. Danny looked up at Scale Singer. They had developed silent communication over the years. The dragon could read his body language the way most people read text. Right now, Danny was asking permission and offering a plan simultaneously. "What are you thinking?" Scale Singer asked, though the dragon already knew. "We steal it. The cure. We fly to the frigate, get inside, access their medical database for the formula, and get out before anyone knows we were there. Then we manufacture it here and send it back anonymously." Rustback had joined them now, drawn by the conversation. "That's insane. That's a military vessel. They have security. They have weapons. They have protocols specifically designed to keep people like us out. They're also in crisis mode," Danny countered. "Security will be focused on quarantine, not intrusion. Everyone will be exhausted and scared. Their systems will be strained. It's actually the perfect time for infiltration." "He's right," Beth admitted. "I hate that he's right, but he's right. Crisis creates opportunity. But Danny, you're a child. You can't go on a heist. I'm small. I can fit in ventilation systems. I can access terminals that adults cannot reach. I have human hands that can manipulate their systems. And I have Scale Singer, who can fly me there and cut through barriers if needed." Scale Singer wanted to say no. Every protective instinct screamed to keep Danny safe and hidden. But the dragon also knew what it was like to watch people die from preventable causes. Knew the rage of seeing bureaucracy kill when solutions existed. "If we do this," Scale Singer said slowly, "we do it together. We plan carefully. We take no unnecessary risks. And if anything goes wrong, we run immediately." Danny grinned. "So we're doing this. We're doing this." Rustback groaned. "I'm too old for this. I left the coalition specifically to avoid this kind of excitement. But you're going to help us anyway," Beth said. It was not a question. "Of course I'm going to help. Someone has to keep them alive when this inevitably goes wrong." Planning took 6 hours. Danny studied the frigate's layout using publicly available schematics. Beth contacted old associates and confirmed the cure formula was stored in the ship's main medical database. Rustback prepared medical supplies in case they came back injured. Scale Singer calculated flight paths and approach vectors. When they finally launched, Danny wore a custom flight suit and harness that Beth had modified from old cargo equipment. He clung to Scale Singer's back the way he had been doing since he was 2 years old. The dragon could feel his heartbeat, faster than normal, but steady. Excited, unafraid. "You could have had a normal life," Scale Singer said as they flew through the space between Frostholm and the frigate. "I could have left you with human authorities. You would have grown up with other children, in proper schools, with proper families." "You are my proper family," Danny said simply. "You're my mom. This is my life, and it's a good life. I wouldn't trade it for anything." The dragon's chest felt full. Pride and fear mixed together. "When did you become so brave?" "I learned from you. You jumped off a battlefield with a baby you didn't know. You gave up everything to keep me safe. If that's not brave, I don't know what is." They flew in silence after that, approaching the medical frigate's distress beacon. The ship was large, designed to handle thousands of patients. Right now, it was a prison of pain and death, full of people who needed help that was being denied for profit. Danny and Scale Singer were about to change that. A dragon and a human child, working together, proving that family was not about species or paperwork. It was about choosing to care, about seeing suffering and deciding to act. The frigate's hull grew larger as they approached. Danny checked his equipment one final time. Scale Singer's claws heated up, preparing to cut through metal if necessary. This was dangerous. This was probably stupid. This was absolutely going to create complications. But it was also right. And sometimes right mattered more than safe. The medical frigate's emergency airlock opened with minimal resistance. Scale Singer's heated claws had sliced through the manual override like cutting paper. Danny slipped through first, moving with practiced silence. The dragon followed, folding wings tight to fit through the narrow space. Inside, the ship was chaos. Medical personnel rushed through corridors carrying equipment and patients. Alarms beeped constantly. The air smelled like disinfectant and fear. Nobody noticed a small human and a dragon moving through the ventilation access point. Everyone was too focused on saving lives. "Third level, medical database core," Danny whispered, consulting the map he had memorized. We need to go up 2 decks. They moved through maintenance passages that ran parallel to the main corridors. Danny was right about his size being an advantage. Adult humans would have struggled to fit through these spaces. He crawled through them easily, with Scalesinger following in a careful crouch. The dragon's scales scraped against metal occasionally, but the sound was lost under the general noise of the crisis. They reached the database core in 12 minutes. Danny examined the security panel while Scalesinger kept watch. The boy's fingers moved across the interface with confidence. He had been learning computer systems since he was 4, taught by Beth, who knew every trick for breaking into secure databases. "Got it," Danny said softly. The door hissed open. Inside was a small room filled with servers and cooling equipment. Danny went straight to the main terminal and started navigating through files. Scalesinger watched the corridor. A nurse hurried past, pushing a patient on a floating stretcher. Neither looked their direction. The dragon's heart was beating fast, pumping hot blood through a system designed for flight and combat. This was different, though. This was sneaking. This was hiding. Dragons were not built for subtlety. "Found the cure formula," Danny said. "Downloading now." "But Scalesinger, there's something else here. Files about New Meridian. About the swarm attack." "Danny, we do not have time for this. It's about my parents." The files mention them by name. They were researchers. They were developing something important. Something about quantum communication that could connect the whole galaxy instantly. Scalesinger moved to look over Danny's shoulder. The text on the screen was dense with technical language, but some parts were clear enough. Danny's parents had been working on technology that would revolutionize how species communicated across vast distances. Current systems relied on relay stations and slow signal propagation. Their invention would have made communication instant across any distance. The swarm attack was not random, Danny said, his voice very quiet. Someone ordered it. Someone from inside the coalition. They wanted the research destroyed and my parents dead. Who? Files do not say. Just references to political factions. People who thought the technology would shift power balances. People who wanted things to stay the same. Scalesinger felt rage building. The dragon had always assumed the attack on New Meridian was just bad luck. The swarm hit colonies at random, looking for resources and biomass. But if it had been assassination, if Danny's parents had been murdered deliberately, then the child Scalesinger had saved was not just an orphan of war. He was a survivor of political murder. Download everything, Scalesinger ordered. We need this evidence. Danny worked quickly, copying files to a portable storage device. The download progress bar moved slowly. Too slowly. Scalesinger could hear footsteps approaching from multiple directions. The crisis might be creating cover, but eventually someone would notice the security breach. The download finished. Danny grabbed the storage device and shoved it into his suit pocket. Got it. Let's go. They left the database core and headed back toward the ventilation system. But voices echoed from the direction they needed to go. A security team doing random patrols even during the crisis. Scalesinger and Danny pressed against the wall, trying to stay invisible. Check this corridor, someone said. I'm reading unusual heat signatures. Danny looked up at Scalesinger. Dragons ran hot. Their body temperature was detectable by thermal scanners. They were about to be discovered. Run, Scalesinger said. I will hold them. No, we run together or not at all. Danny, you're 8 years old. You cannot fight trained security. And you're a parent. Parents do not sacrifice themselves. We find another way. The boy was right. There was always another way. Scalesinger looked around quickly, analyzing options with combat-trained efficiency. Ventilation, shaft too far. Main corridor blocked. But there was a medical supply room 3 doors down, and beyond that a waste disposal chute that led to the ship's recycling system. Come, Scalesinger said, moving fast. They reached the supply room just as the security team rounded the corner. The dragon used heated claws to seal the door behind them, fusing the lock. It would only buy seconds, but seconds were enough. The waste disposal chute was designed for biological waste and used materials. It was not designed for dragons and children, but desperation made people flexible. Danny went first, sliding down into darkness. Scale Singer followed, folding wings tight and hoping the chute was large enough. They fell 3 decks in controlled chaos, landing in a sorting facility that smelled terrible but was mercifully empty. Alarms were blaring now. The security breach had been noticed. They had maybe 5 minutes before the ship went in a lockdown. The Scale Singer grabbed Danny and ran for the nearest airlock. They passed medical staff and patients, none of whom had time to question a running dragon. The chaos was their friend now. In crisis, people focused on immediate problems. A dragon and child heading for an exit was not as important as the plague victims who needed treatment. They reached an airlock on the ship's lower hull. Scale Singer opened it manually, ignoring the safety warnings. Space beckoned beyond, cold and infinite. The dragon wrapped protective arms around Danny, double-checked his suit's seal, and jumped. Flying in vacuum was different from flying in atmosphere. No air resistance. No sound. Just thrust and momentum. Scale Singer used emergency propulsion systems built into dragon biology, firing controlled bursts of compressed gas to navigate. They moved away from the frigate quickly, heading back toward Frostholm. Behind them, the medical ship began launching pursuit craft. But they were slow to mobilize, still focused on the plague crisis. By the time they achieved formation, Scale Singer and Danny were too far away and too small to track effectively. They flew in silence for an hour before speaking. "We got the cure," Danny said finally. "And we got the truth." "Truth is dangerous," Scale Singer replied. "People killed your parents to hide it. They might kill you too. Let them try. I have a dragon for a mom. And I know people who care more about what's right than what's profitable. We'll expose this. We'll make sure everyone knows. You are very brave. Maybe too brave. I learned from the best." They flew toward home, carrying medicine for the dying and evidence of murder. The galaxy was about to get more complicated. But for now, they were together. Dragon and human. Family. Captain Reeves arrived at Frostholm 3 days after the heist. She came alone in a small courier ship, broadcasting peaceful intentions. Beth met her at the landing pad with a weapon casually visible but not pointed. Rustback stood nearby with medical scanners, checking for tracking devices or hidden threats. Danny watched from a window with Scale Singer beside him. "That's the frigate's captain," Danny said. "I saw her in the database files. She's been investigating supply chain corruption for months. Is she here to arrest us?" Scale Singer asked. "Only one way to find out." They went down to meet her together. Captain Reeves was human, older than Beth, with gray in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too many problems. She looked at Danny and Scale Singer without surprise, as if a dragon raising a human child was exactly what she expected to find. "I'm not here to arrest anyone," she said before anyone could ask. "I'm here because you stole medical data that exposed a conspiracy, then anonymously sent cure formulas that saved 87 lives. I want to know who you are and what you know." "Why should we trust you?" Beth asked. "Because I've been investigating the New Meridian attack for 2 years. Because I think the Coalition has rot in its leadership. Because I just spent 3 days watching people die from a plague while bureaucrats argued over pricing." Reeves looked directly at Danny. "And because I think you're the child from New Meridian, the one who disappeared, the one whose parents were murdered." Danny stepped forward. Scale Singer moved with him, protective. "You know about my parents? I know they were brilliant researchers. I know they were developing quantum communication technology. I know they died in a swarm attack that intelligence reports suggest was not random. I've been trying to prove it was assassination, but the evidence keeps disappearing. Until you broke into my ship's database and copied everything." "We have the files," Danny said. "They prove people in the Coalition ordered the attack. They murdered my parents to stop the technology. I need those files. With them, I can bring this to the Council. I can expose the conspiracy." "And what happens to Danny?" Scale Singer asked. "What happens to us?" Reeves was quiet for a moment. "Legally, this situation is complicated. You're a Coalition military dragon who went absent without leave. Danny is a human minor with no legal guardian. By every regulation, I should separate you and place Danny in proper care." Scale Singer's claws extended instinctively. "No, I agree. No. Reeves held up her hands. I said that's what the regulations require. I did not say that's what I'm going to do. I've spent my career following rules, and I've watched those rules protect the corrupt and harm the innocent. Sometimes what's legal and what's right are different things. Danny studied her carefully. He had learned to read people from living in a settlement full of refugees and former criminals. People who lied had certain patterns. Reeves was nervous but honest. She meant what she said. What are you proposing? Danny asked. I take the evidence to the council. I expose the conspiracy. In exchange, I testify that you and Scalesinger are a legitimate family unit. The first cross-species adoption in coalition history. It will be controversial. It will face opposition. But if we're already exposing corruption, we might as well expose stupidity too. You would do this? Scalesinger asked. Risk your career for a dragon and a human child? I became a captain because I wanted to protect people. I wanted to make the galaxy safer and better. Right now, the best way to do that is to help you. Besides, I've seen the medical reports from my own staff. They treated dragon plague victims who credited you with saving their lives. One dragon and one child did what the entire Coalition Medical Authority refused to do. That matters. Beth spoke up. Even if the council accepts cross-species adoption, there will be people who hate this. People who think species should stay separate. People who want things to stay traditional. There are always people like that, Reeves said. But there are also people who know the galaxy needs to change. People who see that cooperation across species lines is our strength, not our weakness. Danny proves that humans can bond with anyone. That's worth celebrating, not hiding. Danny looked up at Scalesinger. The dragon's expression was hard to read for most people, but Danny knew every subtle shift. Right now, Scalesinger was scared and hopeful simultaneously, wanting to believe but afraid to trust. What do you think? Danny asked. I think we've been hiding long enough, Scalesinger said. I think your parents died trying to connect the galaxy. Maybe we can finish what they started in a different way. Then we do it, Danny said. He turned to Reeves. We'll give you the files. We'll testify to the council. And you'll make sure Scalesinger and I stay together. I promise. The journey to the Coalition Council took 2 weeks. Reeves brought Danny and Scalesinger on her ship, along with Beth and Rustback as witnesses. The hearing was held in the Great Chamber on Council Station, with representatives from 40 species watching. Danny testified in perfect dragon language, learned from Scalesinger over 8 years. The council chamber went completely silent as a human child spoke with dragon grammar and inflection, describing how a dragon had saved him and raised him and loved him. Scalesinger testified about finding Danny, about choosing compassion over regulation, about learning that family was not defined by biology. The evidence files were presented, showing the conspiracy behind the New Meridian attack. 3 council members resigned immediately. 7 more faced investigation. The quantum communication research was recovered from hidden databases and given to new teams who would complete the work. But the most revolutionary moment came when the council voted on cross-species adoption rights. 40 species, each with different family structures and cultural values, debating whether love could cross biological boundaries. The vote was close. 23 in favor, 17 opposed. But close was enough that Scalesinger was officially recognized as Danny's guardian. The first cross-species adoption in coalition history. The precedent that would change everything. 5 years later, Danny was 13 years old and traveling the galaxy as a diplomatic advisor. He specialized in helping species understand each other, using the empathy and cross-cultural skills learned from growing up with a dragon. Scalesinger traveled with him always, parent and partner. They stood together on a viewing platform overlooking a newly peaceful colony world. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that reminded Scalesinger of New Meridian so many years ago. Do you ever regret it? Danny asked. Taking me that day? Everything that happened because of it? Scalesinger was quiet for a moment. I regret nothing. You gave me purpose. You taught me that family is a choice, not an accident. You showed me that love is stronger than fear. You taught me the same things. You taught me that being different is not being wrong. That family comes in all shapes. That courage means protecting the people you love. They watched the sunset together, dragon and human, parent and child. Proof that the galaxy's strength came from its diversity. Proof that compassion could cross any boundary. Somewhere in the distance, other families were forming. Other species were learning to see past difference. The quantum communication network was nearly complete, connecting the galaxy in ways Danny's parents had dreamed of. The future was uncertain. It always was. But it was also full of possibility that Scale Singer spread wings wide, and Danny climbed onto the familiar spot on the dragon's back. They took flight together, silhouettes against the sunset, heading toward whatever came next, together. Always together, the way family should be.